Oh, howdy all, grab yourself a beer, it's time for some Path of Exile discussion. Every now and again, I like to put out a video looking at a number of budget uniques. Now, while we're quite late in the Expedition League, that means that the market is flooded with a lot of items. There's a number of items in Path of Exile that are pretty rare generally, but over time, just because there's so many people playing and not all that many people wanting these items, supply of them builds up in the Trade League economy, and you can pick these up pretty cheap, just because more and more people are looting them every day. So I wanted to have a look at 7 unique items, which I feel are really good value for their current price point. All of these are something you could make a build around with less than 200 Chaos Orbs, and many of them you could get something really rolling with 50. So let's start with Replica Infractem. Replica Infractem actually was the motivation for me making this video, and that was because I found a 6-link one in a Grand Heist the other day. And this is a super cheap 6-link item. You can pick them up for 25 Chaos already 6-linked. The reason for that is that Grand Heists have a strong bias towards rolling a lot of sockets and links on the items that they contain in them. A Replica Infractem only drops as a reward from Grand Heists, and this means that you'll frequently find people that have a 6-linked one that they've looted because they've thought, oh yeah, 6-link, that seems good. Then they've gone, you know what, it feels like this is too good to just vendor for a Divine Orb. I'm just going to keep it on the off chance someone wants it. Over time, more and more of them build up in the Trade League economy. And the fact that this item is so cheap is the main reason to use it. The fact that you can pick up a reasonably good physical damage bow for 25 Chaos that's already 6-linked and that has a built-in damage projection mechanic is really solid. So, this bow covers all your damage projection needs. Most bow skills require use of either greater multiple projectiles or awakened chain, or just normal chain, something along those lines in order to be able to hit multiple targets effectively. Replica Infractem has the powerful double fork mechanic that you see on awakened fork support. So projectiles from attacks fork and then fork an additional time. This allows you to spread damage to large packs pretty effectively. It's not necessarily as good as having awakened chain supporting your main skill, but Awakened Chain is an expensive skill gem and it takes up a support gem slot, whereas Replica Infractem grants you that for free. So that's the reason that this is a pretty solid item. Additionally, it works really well in conjunction with sources of additional arrows. Some that come to mind are the Val Implicit on Quivers that grants bow attacks fire an additional arrow. There is the Shaper exclusive Quiver mod, bow attacks fire an additional arrow. And there is the unique flask Dying Sun, which is one of the best flasks in the game still, and is also something that's really cheap this league. Damage on Replica Infractem is neither good nor awful. However, pure physical damage bows can be pretty hard to scale, and this limits the ability to push Replica Infractem into the stratosphere. You'll probably want to replace this item. It's not forever gear, it is a 6-link to get you started, but it is a lot better than some of the other starter 6-links like Tabula Rasa. This can work in conjunction with Lightning Arrow, Ice Shot, or Split Arrow. Also, it can work well with Ice Bite support on Frenzy Charge builds. So if you're playing a build like a Raider that has a lot of Frenzy Charges on it, then Ice Bite support can provide the bulk of your cold damage, and then that can be the starting point for scaling through other means. The weakness of this item is boss damage. You will want a different solution for heavy bossing. If you're familiar with the fight, you'll be able to do up to and including the Shaper with Replica Infractem, but I would say that for bosses like Cirrus and Uber Elder, you're gonna want a better bow. Also, if you like Caustic Arrow, I highly suggest that you check out Replica Quill Rain. It's a similar priced item, and I really wanted to put it in the same sort of category. 30 Chaos for a 6-link. Both of these items are cheap enough that you can even corruption hunt on items that are already 6-linked. So you can take a whole bunch of them that are already 6-linked and Val them, hoping to get a specific Val Implicit. Although that's sort of out of the option if you're looking at, say, 150 Chaos budget overall. But if you've got a budget that's maybe 1,000 Chaos Orbs, then you can certainly Val a whole bunch of Replica Quill Rains, hoping to get something really good as a Val Implicit on there. The second item I wanted to plug is Mark of the Elder. So picture this, you're playing Ice Shot and you have a weapon with only middle tier damage. I wonder where we might be thinking about that. Wouldn't a ring that grants you a bunch of cold and physical damage on the same item be good? Especially if it also came with 60 to 80% increased attack damage, and whichever of life and energy shield your build happens to need. Now, the reason I like this item is because it's super cheap. Basically, people are running Uber Elder a lot at the moment, chasing the very top in-demand drops from Uber Elder. Every league, there's a couple of these. Watcher's Eye is always one of them, and then there's usually something else on the list of Uber Elder drops that people really want. This league, it's Void Fletcher. So they're the two items that people really care about from Uber Elder. However, while people are running Uber Elder, the two most common drops from it are Mark of the Elder and Mark of the Shaper. And Mark of the Elder, I think, is just really underrated at the moment. It's just genuinely a good item. This also goes very, very, very well with rings that are sourced from the divination card Dying Light. Now, Dying Light is hard to self-compile a set of. To the best of my knowledge, it drops solely from the Shaper in the Shaper's Realm and from the Shaper in the Maven's Invitation, the Feared. And neither of these are easy to self-farm, especially given that it's not that common a drop. However, it's pretty easy to pick up a set of 10 of in Trade League, as long as you can stomach all that actual trading. And that will give you an excellent crafting base to put on the other ring slocket. Because with Mark of the Elder, you really, really gain a lot from having both a Shaper and Elder item as your other ring. And that's what Dying Light provides you. Additionally, there's just a lot you can do crafting a Shaper and Elder influenced Diamond Ring. Diamond Ring is a good base, it's the critical strike chance base, and additionally the mod pool on a Shaper and Elder ring is pretty good. Now there's a Tentacle Whip trigger here, a 20% chance to trigger level 20 Tentacle Whip on kill. This is a little bonus, it's a very small bonus, you don't mind it being there, but it's not the reason to use the item, except for the fact that it does look a little bit cool. Last thing to say about Mark of the Elder is that attack damage quality is the correct choice. So even though this does have life on it, you will gain much more from using attack catalysts than you will from using life catalysts on this ring. So next up is Doomfletch's Prism, and this is one of the most build around me items on this list. Doomfletch's Prism is the prophecy upgrade from Doomfletch. So Doomfletch is just a low-level bow that you've probably had drop several times for you. Maybe your loot filter doesn't show it. And then the Ancient Doom Prophecy is used to upgrade it to Doomfletch's Prism, which triples its elemental damage. So with Doomfletch's Prism, you're dealing pretty minimal base physical damage. You have 14% increased attack speed, and you gain 100% of weapon physical damage as extra damage of each element. Now, because of the base type of bow that this is, that's actually not very much. You need to find external sources of scaling this. So that is where you would want to use the dual Coated Shrapnel. The only real way, in my opinion, to use Doomfletch's Prism effectively is in conjunction with Coated Shrapnel and using attack bow mine skills. And this will provide you with a tremendous source of flat physical damage, which then Doomfletch's Prism's line gain 100% of weapon physical damage as extra damage of each element will scale extremely, extremely well. So if you're getting, say, 70 flat physical damage from multiple copies of Coated Shrapnel that you've got in multiple spots on the passive tree, then Doomfletch's Prism will turn that into 70 fire plus 70 lightning plus 70 cold. And you can get a lot more than 70 damage this way. Additionally, you can also use Abyss Jewels, and here's an example of a particularly good one. 8 to 10 added physical damage with bow attacks, 5 to 7 added physical damage to attacks, as well as some life, and then a just totally wasted chaos damage roll. So the way that I would use Doomfletch's Prism, if you decide to build around it, is in conjunction with the skill Split Arrow. Split Arrow has a lot of flat physical damage on it as well, and you're going to want to be linking that to either High Impact Mine support or Blast Chain Mine support, just whichever one ends up working out as doing more damage in Path of Building. Then you want to use as many Coated Shrapnels as you can fit on the tree. This item has fallen off in popularity a bit. It used to be a really popular setup, but it's still something that can certainly get you a fair way through the game, especially in conjunction with the last item on this list, which we'll get to later. Next up is Darkness Enthroned. This is a super common item. This drops every time that you fight an Abyssal Lich and don't get one of the rarer drops. Despite it being best in slot for some builds and the best until Headhunter for many others, it's just a 5 chaos item. Now, what Darkness Enthroned does is it lets you give up your belt slot effectively for 3.5 Abyss Jewels. So what I mean by 3.5 Abyss Jewels is that you can socket 2 Abyssal Jewels into Darkness Enthroned, but each of them has 75% increased effect. So it's like you're getting 3.5 Jewels. And this obviously scales up a lot with investment, But the thing that made Darkness Enthroned much better, firstly, the 75% used to be 50%, so it got buffed there as well. But the other thing that made it a lot better recently was the addition of the well-rolled system to Abyss Jewels. So when an Abyss Jewel drops as a rare item and has dropped from an Abyssal Trove, that jewel will be well-rolled. It's guaranteed to have 4 mods, and they tends to be a little bit of a bias towards higher tier mods rolling on it. This makes Darkness Enthroned much easier to get middling tier Abyssal Jewels for. You know, maybe you're not getting something that's amazing, but you get something that's better than average, much cheaper than you could have in previous leagues. The other thing that's great about Darkness Enthroned, because it's so cheap, you can get it with whatever harvesting belt enchant you want in a trade league. Now, one thing that needs to be said, do not Vaal this item. This item feels like something you would want to Vaal, but that has one Abyssal socket that at the top. So it's got 2 lines here. You've got the first line says has 1 Abyssal socket, then the second line says has 1 Abyssal socket. This first one isn't implicit. This is going to be destroyed if you Vaal this item. And so you'll end up with, assuming that your Vaal orb is successful, you'll end up with a Vaal implicit and then a belt that only has 1 Abyssal socket in it. Needless to say, this is pretty disappointing result, and so don't Vaal this item. This is sometimes used in conjunction with unique Abyss Jewels, but this is normally not done so. The unique Abyss Jewels are sort of okay without being great. There's certainly something you can look into. Maybe there's one that's perfect for your build, but most of the time, the Darkness Enthroned is used in conjunction with 2 rare Abyss Jewels. Next up, we're going to talk Void Battery. Now, I did a whole video on this in my Endgame Unique series. The reason I'm mentioning it again here, though, is that this has gotten so cheap this league. This is the sort of item that starts the league at 5, 6, 7 exalts. Then it starts to fall off, but it usually stays 3 exalts for quite a while. Well, this league, although it's a rare, drop anywhere a unique item at the same rarity as Chevron's Wrappings, there's lots of them in circulation, and you can actually pick up a Void Battery for under 40 Chaos in the current league. Now, you're going to want to get yourself an uncorrupted one, as these benefit a lot from harvest enchants. Also, Void Battery is an item that is best dual wielded. The reason for this is that it scales so much off power charges, but it also provides you with an additional maximum power charge. So here we've got a line +1 to maximum power charges. Then we have this 80% reduced spell damage with some increase to compensate for it as the implicit. But then later on we have this 25% increased spell damage per power charge. So if you've got seven power charges maximum on your character, then you're looking at getting 175% increased spell damage minus this 80 for 95% as the explicits. But if you've got an 8th one, you're looking at plus 120. If you've got a 9th, you're looking plus 145%. And that's why it is that Void Battery is so much better when it's dual wielded. Each one of them makes the other one better. So every Ascendancy that can scale power charges well, which includes the Occultist and the Assassin and more, can use this item well. It's even better in conjunction with the very expensive unique Badge of the Brotherhood. Badge of the Brotherhood, however, is still expensive in the current league. That's not going to change. It's in the top rarity tier for drop anywhere items. It's probably 3 times as rare as Void Battery. And there's a lot of people that want Badges of the Brotherhood. And there's also a lot of people that want to wreck them by corruption hunting on them as well. And so that means that there's just a steady drain of them out of the Trade League economy. So for that reason, grab yourself 2 Void Batteries now. And then later on, if you're able to afford it, grab a Badge of the Brotherhood to go with them as well. Badge of the Brotherhood synergy, though, is so good, having the fact that it changes effectively this first line, your maximum frenzy charges is equal to your maximum power charges. This creates a situation where the +1 to maximum power charges on each of your Void Batteries is also double dipping and giving you a frenzy charge as well. And every build benefits from frenzy charges. So that's Void Battery. One thing to note here, if you're in solo self-found, getting 2 of these is not happening. Sorry. It's not to say that it won't happen for anyone. There are people that definitely get 2 Void Batteries, but it probably won't be you because they are very rare and you need extreme luck for that. So next up, I want to talk about Ryslatha's Coil, talking about items that have usually been chase items in previous leagues. Ryslatha's Coil is in the rarest tier of drop anywhere uniques other than Headhunter. It's the same as Badge of the Brotherhood. But in 3.15, it got a new Divination card. And this Divination card drops enough to matter across the whole Trade League. This isn't saying that you can realistically self-farm this item, It's something that you're probably going to have to trade for from another player. But the fact that there are so many of these divination cards dropping across the whole Trade League economy means that Ryslatha's Coil is much more affordable than it's been in the past. So where this item might have been 7 or 8 Exalted Orbs at this time in the 3.14 League, this league it is available for less than 50 Chaos. Now the key mod on this item is the 30 to 40% more maximum physical attack damage, which can be scaled up to 48% in conjunction with attack catalysts. This item achieves two things. Less importantly, it helps you to stun enemies because you get individual bigger hits to stun them better. But more importantly, it scales bleed incredibly well. So there's been extensive testing that has confirmed that Ryslatha's Coil's modifiers to your maximum attack physical damage and minimum physical attack damage, that these widen the damage output range that bleed can do. So this means that it adds a lot of extra variance to your hits. So if your hits would normally do 100 to 200 damage, and let's say you've got 48% for both mods, so this means that instead of 100 to 200 damage, you are now dealing 52 damage on an extremely unlucky hit and 296 on an extremely lucky hit. Firstly, that's actually increasing your hit damage a little bit. But secondly, with bleed only cares about the biggest individual hit you've done in the last few seconds. 5 by default, but for most bleed builds, it does tend to be more than 5 seconds. So this means that with Ryslatha's Coil, that you're essentially getting up to 48% more damage from your bleeding because you're sometimes getting your top end has gone up that much. It's not actually 48% in practice, but it's actually pretty close if your build is attacking fairly fast. And so that's what makes this item so good. You only want to use Ryslatha's Coil usually on a build that is bleed based, but when you are using it, Ryslatha's Coil is exceptional. Without Crimson Dance, that's a keystone on the passive tree, bleed scales based upon the largest hit in the last few seconds. With Crimson Dance, it scales on the largest 8 hits in that time. And either way, having this increased variance means that you will more frequently get rolls towards the higher end of your damage spectrum, and you will sometimes get them higher than you otherwise could. Last thing to say about Ryslatha's Coil is that it has a very, very weak traditional implicit. This means that this item Vals or Corruption Chambers well, but of course make sure that you apply Catalyst and Divine Orbs first, otherwise you could end up in that tragic situation of having staggeringly good implicits on it, and unfortunately no one wants it because it's only giving 32% more maximum physical attack damage, when someone would just rather have a 48% one that's not corrupted instead. And the last item I want to cover is the Taming. So the Taming is just a lot of damage on one item. And resist as well, although it's got no life. Now this comes from a vendor recipe. You need to vendor 3 unique rings. Beric's Respite, which is quite rare, Beric's Grip and Beric's Pass, which are much more common. Now Respite is Ryslatha's Coil rarity tier, whereas the other two do drop a lot more often than that. This will give you 132% increased damage if your character is inflicting freezes, shocks and ignites semi-regularly on enemies. And that's a lot, and you can use 2 of them. Now that 132% is based upon having 20% elemental damage modifiers quality on it, but you're definitely going to do that. And so ultimately, that is the last item that I'm going to suggest in this video as somewhat of a build around. It works quite well in conjunction with the Doomfletch Prism mines, as I mentioned before, because that can freeze, shock, and ignite, but that's not the only type of build that can do all of these ailments. Other things you could potentially use it with would be all sorts of conversion shenanigans. You could use it on various elementalist builds. This is one of those flexible items that as long as you're dealing a lot of elemental damage, you can get a lot of benefit out of. Anyways, that's a few underrated uniques in this league. If you've got any comments or questions, definitely fire away below. Otherwise, may your Val Orbs have interesting results, and remember always to Divine Orb and catalyze your Ryslatha's Coils before you apply the Val Orbs to them.